How to Trade Forex, Lecture 10. And in this lecture we're going to look at support and resistance, extremely important if you're trying to predict the changes in price and therefore make money. We're also going to look at pivot points. These are points on your charts where there's a high likelihood that the price will change to a different direction. So let's get into it. Support and resistance. So support and resistance are invisible lines drawn on your trading platform that tend to form barriers for price movements. Where the barrier is in the direction of a reducing price, we call that support or the floor. Where it is a barrier to further increases in the price, we term that resistance. There are many instances of support and resistance that you'll see on the charts, and we'll give you lots of examples as we go forward. Support and resistance are then price levels on charts that are revisited several times. That's important. They're revisited several times, and they seem to form invisible barriers to the movement of price in a particular direction. Support is a lower barrier, a floor barrier, and resistance is an upper barrier or a ceiling. And here we can see a graphic showing some levels of support and resistance. And if we then move that to a real chart, you can see again some support and resistance. So let's talk about support first. The support line drawn in heavy black here is across the bottom, and it has been revisited on this chart alone 4 times. So you can see it's been hit only by the tails of the candlesticks involved, but that still counts. So we've had a level of support because we've got the price hitting this invisible barrier or more than once, so in this case 4 times. So the black line that is the support line is only something that I've drawn in. It's invisible. It doesn't normally appear on your trading platform unless you put it there. So similarly, the resistance line at the top is forming a barrier, an invisible barrier to further price rises. And it is resistance because although it's only been visited twice on this chart, that still counts. So it has been visited as a barrier twice. Therefore, we've got support and resistance. Now you'll note that these 2 lines of support and resistance happen to be horizontal and also they are parallel. That's not always necessarily the case. So in a few moments I'm going to show a video which will look more closely at pivot points. But an interesting point to note as we go into this is that pivot points are used by traders to objectively determine potential support and resistance levels. So that's not guess, not just have a sort of sixth sense for, but to objectively determine where points of resistance and support actually are. Let's have a closer look at pivot points. Here we've got again a nice clean chart. It's the pound dollar, and this is a 1-day time scale. So each of the candlesticks you're looking at represents 1 day. And the blue horizontal lines that we've got, they are at whole price 1 cent intervals. So we've got 166, 167, 168 and so on. And looking back over this period, and one little trick I wanted to show you while we're here is how to measure a period that we're looking at. And we can do it using this crosshair tool, which is up on the top left here. So I left click on it and I pull it onto the main screen. I can then with my left hand mouse button pressed down, drag the crosshair across. And it will tell me how many candlesticks I've moved across, and you can see the first figure there is 79. If I pull it back, the first figure is 53. So that's quite useful. So we're looking here at a period of just over 100, so 103 or so, 100 or so candlesticks, and therefore 100 or so days. If I do that again, pick up the crosshair, pull it to a particular point, for example here, and left hand click and pull it down to another point. So I've now got not only a measure of the number of candlesticks involved, which is 21, but I can also see that it's moved by 30.3 pips, and that we've ended up at the point which is 1.66905. So that's quite a handy little tool to use. But the issue here is pivot points on and around whole price numbers. So let's have a look. Starting on the left, we've got the whole price number being used here very much as a level of support or resistance. We've had a price rise up over a number of days, so this is not just by the minute or anything, and it's used another price point as a pivot point to turn round before it actually came back and went up. And look here, this is not an exact science, but we got very close to that 170 point before that was used as a pivot point. It's come down, and it's not always perfect. It hasn't worked here. There can be lots of other factors, and we'll find some of those later on. But again, it's gone up, and although some of the wicks of these candles have gone through that line, that's where it was pivoting. Here we can see an area where it was hesitating. Here again, it's used as a pivot point, gone straight through this one without touching the sides on a daily basis. That's a huge day, by the way. And again, lots of examples of pivot points or near pivot points, points of hesitation, and so on. So there are pivot points as we can see them on a daily chart. But if we go right back down to a 1 minute chart, we're not able to see the daily ones because there are none actually in view. And even if I change the scale, there were none in play on this particular period. If we go up to 5 minutes, beyond to 15, we're now beginning to see one. And we've got one which is working here. The price has been steadily falling, but when it got to the whole price number, it hesitated, it stopped, it growled around a bit, and used it again as a point of resistance before falling off and away. On the 30 minutes, we still only got one in view. On the 1 hour, we've now got two in view. We can see there was good use of the pivot line at 167 here, with 1, 2, 3, probably 4 attempts to get through it before there was a gap up. When it came back down, it's used the same point as a hesitation, a point of resistance. It's used 166 down here, and it's used it again at least twice, 3 times here, and so on. Up to 4 hours, again, very, very clear. The points of hesitation are around these whole numbers. The day we've already seen, let's have a look at the weekly one. Even the weekly one, it's there using them on a regular basis. And the monthly one, it's a little bit too small to see, but again, quite amazing how many of the tops and bottoms of these candlesticks coincide with whole price point numbers. So pivot points using whole price numbers are going to be very important to us.